back to like, you have an excuse all the time to do the wrong thing. You have an excuse all the time to go back to the familiar. You have an excuse all the time why to say the whole world is against you and be right. But so what? Now what? Now what are you going to do about it? How happy do you want to be? Your life will rise to the level you settle for, and just to keep pushing.
What did you do? How did you get out of it? Like, what was the first job that you got?
When I was homeless?
Yeah.
I started, because I grew up singing. I was like, maybe I could get a gig somewhere and start singing, because I made money singing, like for my whole life since I was little, like $100, $200, but whatever. So I'd go around to coffee shops in the area, but San Diego started to be a hotbed for signing activity, grunge. There was like kind of a grunge scene in San Diego. And so I'd go in there and they charged you to sing there. I was like, this is not ideal. Like, they wanted me to pay them $200. I was
really?
Like, yeah. I was like, this is the
for
exact...
one gig?
Yeah.
And was the idea that you would sell tickets?
They thought it was like a signing. You would get signed.
Oh, God.
You know what I mean? Because it became like so many record labels, I guess, were coming down at the time. I remember this one lady, like, my friend let me sit in on his gig. So I go sing with him. I'm starting to write my own songs. Oh, I forgot to tell you how I started writing songs back at school, but I'll tell you later.
I'll remember that.
So I started writing songs and singing my own stuff. I get on my friend's gig. He's packed the place out. I don't clearly, but he has it crowded. There's like a door charge. So I go to settle out while he's taking his gear down. And this woman coffee shop owner was like, you guys don't get the door money. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, he brought all these people in. She's like, no. She goes, you get the tip jar. And I was like, oh. I was like, you know what then? Why don't we get all your coffee and food money? You could just give us that instead. And she was like, you don't get the food and beverage money. You get the tip jar. And I was so upset. I needed the money so badly. Like, I didn't have food. Like, I was really wanting some money from that gig. And I remember I put my little finger in her face and I was like, I am cursing you.
Whoa.
You are, I know, it sounded so heavy. I was like, you are stealing from the people that are giving you a living. You're stealing from this guy. And I was like, you will go out of business. I was like, nobody can stay in business doing this to humans. I was so upset at her. And
Did he have a understanding with her, or was he just getting robbed?
He didn't care. He just didn't care. I was so
fucking hippies.
Blown away. I was like... He just wanted to be easygoing and didn't want to make her mad and wanted to get another gig there. And I was just so upset. And so I found this place. I liked this little, when I was living in my car, there was a little tree that was flowering tree, and I liked to park next to it. So like that was my home. And I noticed there was this coffee shop right there that was going out of business, and it was really off the beaten path. And so I went in there and I talked to the lady who owned it. Her name was Nancy. And I was like, do you think you could stay open for 2 more months? And she's like, why? I'm like, if I bring people in, can I keep the door money? You can keep all the coffee and food. And like, we'll try and make it together. And
Whoa.
She said yes. And so I started going down on like the beach front in San Diego, and I'd sing, like street sing. And I'd tell people I'm singing at the Interchange Coffee Shop on Thursday night at 6:00. And 2 people came. Like, it was 2 surfers that thought I was hot, I think. And I did a 5-hour show, because bar singing, you do 5-hour shows. And I just thought I had to do a 5-hour show. So I started writing a ton of material. Plus, I was using writing not to steal. And I was a prolific thief. So I had to become a prolific writer. And so I did this 5-hour show to these 2 guys. I'm bleeding my heart out because I was so lonely. And I realized I never tell the truth. Like, nobody knows the truth. I'm scared to death. I'm not a great person. I'm stealing. And I'm lonely. And I was like, maybe if I tell the truth, I won't feel so lonely. So I made a promise that I would write really honest songs. So these poor 2 surfers were subjected to 5 hours of like bleeding out my like vocal cords. Like, it was amazing. I made $10. And the next night, then I would go sing all throughout town on the street corner. I'd say, hey, Thursday night, they knew where to see me. And it just grew. It went from 2 people to 4 people to 8 people to 40 to 80 to capacity to people standing outside watching me sing through the window. And I got discovered.
Wow.
Yeah. It was nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Wow. What was that like? What was the feeling like when it was at capacity and you recognized that these people were, that something was changing in your life? These people were coming out to see you perform.
the coolest thing and why I'm smiling is because I was changing. It moves me to tears right now. Like even before the people came, I felt a momentum shifting. You know, I just felt I was getting better. I was getting healthier. I was getting happier. My panic attacks, like I found out how not to have them. Like it just made me feel good. And then when these people came, I just bore my soul and I just didn't pull a punch. And they liked me. And I know that sounds superficial, but it wasn't, because it was so authentically me. I wasn't pretending to be better or more talented. It was so raw. And people would cry and I would cry. And it was just such a real connection. Like for the first time in my life, I had a real, meaningful human connection. And it wasn't scary. It felt good. And they would give me books to read and they would give me food. And I didn't think it would lead to a record deal. It just felt like being fed for the first time in your life, you know, and not hiding and not being fake and just being really authentic. So it felt really good. And then when more people came, it just took on a momentum that was like, holy shit.
How much time is passed from the two people to people standing outside?
You know, I don't know, but 6 months maybe-ish, something like that.
That's a lot of change in 6 months.
Yeah, maybe a little more, 8 months, but couldn't have been more than that because I don't think I was homeless more than a year.
What was that change? Had to feel crazy.
It was wild. It was cool. And, you know, from like being on stage, but like I wouldn't make a set list and I would just feel the audience. And like I talked and I tell a lot of stories and like kind of like stand up. I would just tell like just stories and jokes and just shoot shit with people in the audience. And they were just these really live, electric, like kind of wild shows and make them dead quiet. And I would just take little breaks so people could use the bathroom. And when people started standing outside and they couldn't hear, but they were just watching me through the window and the look on their face, like to this day, it like gives me chills. Like they looked at me with like a certain look and it was like, holy shit, like this is different. And they would stand out in the rain. Like we put little speakers out there so they could hear, and people would stand in the rain and just listen to me singing through the window with little speakers. And it was just like, it was very humbling, like very, very humbling.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then what happens? How do you get discovered?
There was a radio DJ, programmer, excuse me. He ran 91X, which is a really big radio station in the country. They might have been number 2 in the country at the time. Heavy alternative station. Somebody told him about this girl singing in a coffee shop and that he should come. And he came in. I could recognize new faces when they come in because this wasn't a big place, by the way. I mean, this might have been 70 people that could fit inside. That's a tiny coffee shop.
So you had developed a crowd, like
Yeah.
You were accustomed to seeing familiar faces.
Yeah, it was a loyal, diehard fan base. Like tiny, don't get me wrong, but I knew them. You know what I mean? It was like a little family in a way. And so this guy came in. He had a goatee, his flannel shirt on. He looked kind of hard, and he was sitting in the back. And I remember singing the song 1,000 Miles Away, and he was just weeping, like quietly, but just tears were streaming down his face. And he came up to me afterwards. He's like, hey, I'm at the radio station, and like, why don't you come in, like sing a song one night or something? And I was like, okay. So I go in there, still living in, I got another car. So I had a car to live in. I'd saved up enough door money to buy a car, a cheap car, like a couple $100 car. So I get down to the radio station, and I sing a song for him, and we talk a little bit. And I guess he went ahead, him and this guy named Lou Niles, put it on the radio, and it got requested by fans. That's back when you could still request songs and they'd listen to it. And it got somehow into the top 20, of this station, which is a big deal. Like top 20 on that station was like, labels pay a lot of money to promote their artists to try and get them into the top 20. And this was like an acoustic guitar demo in the middle of like all this grunge music. And so record labels were like, what is this song that's showing up on this playlist? And they would call him, and he's like, it's this chick down at this coffee shop. And so all of a sudden there would be like these limousines pulling up, and they would give sweet little Nancy, that was just, she was having a banging business now, which felt so good. And they would be like, she'd be like, Jules, Sony Records is here tonight. And I'd be like, all right. I was so passé about the whole thing. It was very funny. And then they'd take me out to tacos and talk to me about record deals. And then there was a bidding war. It was every label came down, every label. they'd flown from New York. They'd bring in bigger executives. Then they'd fly in. They'd come again. They'd, all these limousines showing up. And I would start to get flown around to talk to different record labels. And
How long does this process take?
I don't know. I'm kind of bad with time that way. I don't know, a couple months, something like that.
And you don't have a manager. You don't have anybody speaking for you.
Mm-mm. No, but I went to the library and I found this book called
How to Manage Yourself for Dummies.
It was Don Passenheim, I think, called Everything You Need to Know About the Music Business.
Oh, boy.
And that sounded good. So I read it and I just learned about mechanicals and royalties and back ends and advances.
Oh, so you did your homework.
I did my homework and there ended up being a huge bidding war over me. All the labels just started like competing. By this time, I kind of found like a de facto manager. I maybe got a lawyer here at some point, and this might now have taken more time. But I realized because of reading that book that an advance is a loan. You don't get to keep the money. You pay it back through record sales. And so I did the math to see how many records I'd have to sell to pay back $1 million. And it was a lot of records. And so it was like having a bounty on my head as an artist. I almost didn't sign my record deal because I had just figured out how to be happy. Like, genuinely. I was really starting to figure it out, and I knew it, like, inside myself. I was doing so much better. And God forbid you take somebody with my emotional background and they ever get famous. I'm the recipe for every movie you've seen about every musician. Like,
right.
And again, I didn't want to be a statistic, and I fought so hard for my happiness up to this point that I was like, I don't think I could trust myself to have a record deal and figure out how to do that career without self-imploding. So I almost didn't sign it. I remember being on the beach one day and I was like, I wanted to do it, but I was terrified of doing it. So I made myself a promise that my number one job would still be to figure out how to be happy. And my number two job would be to be a musician. And then under the musician category, that I wanted to be an artist more than I wanted to be famous. And so knowing those was like having my North Star, and I felt like I could navigate and make decisions based on those things. And so I went ahead and signed the record deal. I turned down the advance. I turned down $1 million bonus.
Holy shit.
As a homeless kid.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. That is so crazy.
And I took the
How
biggest...
How did you do that? I would have taken that money for sure, 100%. I'd have been like, I'll figure it out in the future. Taking this money. I'm getting a fucking fat apartment overlooking the water.
It was not what I did.
As a homeless kid, you passed on $1 million.
I did.
Wow.
But I took the biggest back end anybody had ever been awarded. And so if I sold records, I was going to make a shit ton. So because like under the artist category, I wanted to be an artist more than I wanted to be famous. And it meant I had to put myself in an environment and in a position to win as a singer-songwriter and as a folk singer, no less, at the height of grunge. The odds of that working, I knew were really slim. And I felt like the bidding war over me was just much more of like a dick contest between all the labels. I didn't think it necessarily had to do with my talent. I thought I was talented, but I thought the odds were still really, really against me. And I had to put myself in a position to be able to weather the fact that my first album may not be successful. But if you have $1 million signing bonus, you have to have your first record be successful or else you'll get dropped because you cost so much to the label. And so I was just doing it to put myself in a position to make my art first and to not leverage my art unduly. You know, it's like saying you have to grow a pear, but you don't even have a tree yet. Like, I had to grow a tree. Like, the pear was a long way away. And so I just tried to look at it kind of agriculturally or in a natural system of like, I have to plant a seed. I have to like grow it.